I've seen you talk about the fact that you've climbed up the pyramid 5 times. I think you've said that, right?
Yeah.
And when you go there to the Sphinx of Giza, and you're there, right? The Great Sphinx of Giza. What do locals say when you talk to them? Is there a debate of what it is?
Well, the local name is Abu al-Hol, the father of terror, but nobody can really explain why. I've asked that question.
Is there any ideas, or do they have some kind of examples of?
No, nobody's ever given me an
father of terror.
But that's how it's known. Yeah.
Have researchers given opinions why it's called the father of terror?
Not that I know of. No, it's just locally known. Anybody who lives in the village of Nazlet
father of terror in Arabic. The name is a reference of legendary Sphinx that would terrorize people by making them answer a riddle.
Yeah.
The Sphinx is a world famous monument that sits in front. So, but what
the people who live in Nazlet al-Saman, which is the village directly under the Sphinx.
Yeah.
They can't tell you why it's called Abu al-Hol.
But how do they feel about it? What's their, they're
very proud of it.
In what way? Why are they proud of it?
Because it's a beautiful, magnificent thing. It's 270 feet long. It's 70 feet high. It towers over the Nile River. It looks out due east over the basin of the Nile, and fundamentally because it is a worldwide icon, it's something that Egypt rightly is very proud of. Nobody else has the Great Sphinx of Giza. Plenty of people have got pyramids, but nobody else has got the Great Sphinx. So there's a sense of pride. There's a sense of pride for the whole Giza Plateau, that it's something special that Egypt has, which other cultures don't have.
What's the story that they tell when they're having kids and their kids go to school? What story do they tell on what happened there?
When I've talked to Egyptians, local Egyptians living in Nazlet al-Saman, they believe that the Sphinx is much, much older than the time of the dynastic Egyptians.
Really?
They believe that it's as old as time itself.
They believe it's as old as time itself. And why do they believe that?
Well, just look at it. That's why. Those erosion patterns around the side. There's a sense, a feeling of great antiquity about it. Of course, they're not looking up encyclopedias and going into the archaeological textbooks. They're just giving a gut reaction to this amazing thing.
So when you talked about what it took to build a pyramid, right? The stats you gave, you said it's 6 million tons, 481 feet high.
Correct.
You can say it probably better than that.
I'll say it exactly. The calculated weight is 6 million tons. The height is presently around 450 feet. But that's because the top 30 feet of the Great Pyramid came off in an earthquake around about the year 1300. So when you calculate the angle of slope, and it's 52 degrees angle of slope on each side, and project it further beyond the broken off top, you'll find that the original height of the Great Pyramid was 481 feet in height. Right now it's about 450. How
studied and researched is it? And what do we not, I guess the question would be, how studied and researched is it? The pyramid.
Well, I would say that this is amongst the most excavated and most studied archaeological sites in the entire world. So it's amazing that they're still finding new things there. For example, there's been using a high-tech scanning equipment, muon scanning, I believe. Just in the last 3 years, enormous cavities have been identified within the Great Pyramid, which nobody knew were there. There's a huge feature, famous feature within the Great Pyramid called the Grand Gallery, and it looks like there's another Grand Gallery above it, which has been identified by scanning, but nobody's got into it yet. Yeah, you can see it in some of those. No, that's the Grand Gallery, but you can also see the scanning there.
Zoom in, right?
There's the Grand Gallery, and above it is the Scan Pyramid's big void. Nobody knew that was there until very, very recently, and it's not the only void that's in the Great Pyramid. So we're still finding out about new things about the Great Pyramid. Now, that void could be an architectural feature. It appears to slope at the same angle as the Grand Gallery, or it might not be. It might just be, it's hard to understand why a sort of random vacant space would be left in this monument. But the fact is, all we know at the moment is that there's this huge cavity inside the pyramid that nobody has yet got into. And it isn't the only part of the pyramid. Out of the Queen's Chamber, so-called, when we call the chambers of the pyramids Queen's chamber, King's chamber. There's no basis for that. There's no evidence that any queen was ever buried in the Great Pyramid. Nor is there any evidence that any king, any pharaoh was ever buried in the Great Pyramid, because no pharaonic burial was ever found inside it. But there's the Queen's chamber. And on the right-hand wall and on the left-hand wall, there are two little shafts cut into the wall. Actually, those shafts were invisible until, I believe it was 1872, when a curious British researcher went around tapping on the walls of the Queen's chamber. He had a reason to do that, because the King's chamber, I suspect that's a King's chamber one.
It is.
Yeah, the King's chamber shafts were already known. There were shafts in the King's chamber, and actually you could find their exit on the outside of the pyramid. You could roll a cannonball down them, and they would end up in the King's chamber. So, but there's no exit for the Queen's chamber shafts. But he figured, look, if there's shafts in the King's chamber, maybe there's shafts in the Queen's chamber too. So he went around tapping on the walls, and sure enough, he found two hollow points. People didn't care about vandalism in those days. He got out a hammer and chisel and just hammered them through. And lo and behold, there's a horizontal passageway, and then it's leading up at an angle. It's about that high and that wide. Let's say 8 inches high and 8 inches wide. It's just very, very small. You can't get a human being in there. But back in the 90s, a special robot was designed, which was sent up there, sent up the southern shaft first. And what it found, after a journey of more than 160 feet, what it found was a door, a little stone door with two metal handles blocking the shaft. So the question is, what lies beyond that door? A new robot was designed with a drill on the front of it. They send the robot back up the shaft. They drill a hole in that door. What do they see when the camera goes through that hole? They see a cavity about 4 feet wide and another door at the end of that, closed, shut. And of course, they've not been able to drill through that one yet. So it's the same story on the other shaft as well. So what we're getting is evidence that the Great Pyramid still has many secrets to reveal. Years of study. In some ways, you could say thousands of years of study, and you can definitely say 150 years of detailed archaeological study, have still not got to the bottom of the mysteries of the Great Pyramid. They've not solved how it was built. There are many theories as to how it was built.
But this is roughly 2,000, 2,500 BC, right? Something like that.
Yeah, that's the establishment date for the construction of the Great Pyramid. I don't have a big problem with that date. I think in the Great Pyramid we're looking at a multi-generational project. I completely reject the notion that the Great Pyramid was a tomb and only a tomb, which is what Egyptologists say. And I reject the notion that this massive, incredibly precise monument, because it is almost perfectly aligned to true north, south, east, and west, that it could have been built in the 23 years of Khufu's reign. I mean, you don't start building your own tomb until you're actually on the throne. So he was on the throne for 23 years, and that's what Egyptologists say, the pyramid was built in 23 years. I can't accept that. Nobody who's got a background in engineering and construction who I've talked to can accept that either. This thing couldn't be built in 23 years unless there was some kind of extraordinary technology that the ancient Egyptians possessed, which we don't yet know that they possessed. It looks much more likely that it was built up over a long period of time, but that undoubtedly the pharaohs of the 4th dynasty finished it off and put the casing stones that were once on the outside of the Great Pyramid. But I'm of the opinion, and again, this is just my view based on my own research and my own work, is that what stood at the Giza Plateau 12,500 years ago was the Sphinx in the form of a lion. Were some megalithic temples. There's a huge megalithic temple called the Vali Temple right next door to the Great Sphinx. Again, there's nothing that connects it in writing that connects it to any particular epoch, but it has blocks of stone that weigh 100 tons each. Those are also heavily weathered, just as the Sphinx is. So my suggestion is that on the Giza Plateau, you have a number of megalithic temples, which still stand. You have the Great Sphinx, and you had ground platforms, not very high, where the 3 pyramids were built, laid out in a very specific, very precise angle to one another. And that precise angle matches the angle of the, yes, this is the Vali Temple. And what we're looking at there is exactly an interesting point, because you're looking at granite blocks that were put there in Old Kingdom times that face limestone blocks. And it's those limestone blocks that are behind those granite blocks. You can see them if you look right to the back. You can see the limestone blocks that haven't been covered with facing stones. So just as we believe that the Sphinx was restored by the pharaohs, we also, I'm speaking of I and my colleagues, are also of the opinion that the Vali Temple was restored by the pharaohs. But what they found was a much, much, much older monument, which they treasured and valued and venerated.
You've climbed all the way to the top 5 times, you said, right?
I have.
Now, let me ask you, when you climb all the way, are you tied to anything, or is it open like it's... Rob, can you... Because I just found a video of somebody climbing all the way to the top, and this is... Can you play this clip, Rob, the one I just sent you? So this is a fellow. I don't know who this is.
Yeah.
They posted this video. Is this literally what it looks like when you climb to the top?
You bet. That's exactly what it looks like. It's mountaineering to a certain extent. And
I mean, if you fall, you're falling.
If you're more than 20 feet up and you fall, you're pretty much certain to be dead. If you're 200 feet up, you definitely will be dead. And people die every year climbing the Great Pyramid.
How do you come down carefully? Because this is essentially 45 stories high.
Yeah. That's right. You come down very carefully. I was actually on one of the climbs that I and my wife Santha did. I was ahead, and I reached up to...
You can pause, Rob.
Some of the blocks
right.
are only this high. Some of them are almost 6 feet high, and you have to pull yourself up onto them. The courses vary in height from course to course. And I was levering myself. I got hold of the top of a block, and I was pulling myself up onto that so that I could get my knees onto it and get on the top. When the limestone that I was holding, which was very eroded, broke off in my hands, I fell back. Fortunately, my wife was right behind me, and she pushed me very, very hard and stopped me falling. But that could have been the end of me.
I just searched right now.
Which many Egyptologists would wish it perhaps had been.
I'm sure they would. But I just searched the following, Rob. How many people die climbing the Great Pyramid? Okay. And the number shows over 1,600 people have died climbing the pyramid in the last 200 years. I can see that, because if you fall 1, 2, 3, 4, you're not going to be able to stop yourself there. I mean, that's pretty...
The slope is 52 degrees. It's a steep slope. And once you start rolling, you're gone. There's no way. And that's why people get killed.
What do you feel like when you're all the way at the top? What is there an energy you feel? Is there when you're looking around, what are you thinking? What are you feeling when you're all the way at the top?
It's a magnificent and majestic place to be. There's first of all a sense of relief. I got to the top without...
How long does it take on average?
For me, about 25 to 30 minutes to do the climb. There was a gentleman, in fact, the gentleman who helped me with my first climb of the Great Pyramid, who's now passed away. He was known locally as Champion because back in the 1930s and 40s, people used to run races up the Great Pyramid. And he was able to run up the Great Pyramid and do the climb in 11 minutes. Well, I'm not as fit as he was. So in my case, about 25 minutes to half an hour.
That's still good, though. I mean, to get up there in 25 minutes.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
So, okay, play the other clip, Rob, the other one that shows the inside of it. And this is just kind of giving a glimpse. This is apparently what Harvard put together. Can you get out to kind of a...
Well, that's a good place to be, actually. That's a good place to be, because that's Mamun. That's called Mamun's Hole.
Thanks to Harvard University, you can virtually now enter the pyramid. Okay, Can you show that, Rob? Go back and play the clip, and maybe you can narrate this for us while we're looking at it.
Sure.
Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah. Okay, go back to the beginning. I need to explain to you what we're actually looking at here. Can I do that?
Yeah, please go for it, yes.
What we're looking at here is the result of an Arab investigation of the Great Pyramid in the 9th century under a caliph called Caliph al-Mamun, who was very curious about antiquities. And he was already aware of other pyramids in Egypt in which the entrance was in the north face. As a matter of fact, the entrance to all Egyptian pyramids is in the north face. But at that time, the true entrance of the Great Pyramid was not visible because all of the sides were sheerly covered sheer with beautiful polished limestone facing stones, some of which individually could weigh as much as 16 tons. They were completely covered and closed the pyramid, and nobody knew where the entrance was. It seems that in ancient times there was a way to open that doorway, to open those facing stones and to get in. but nobody knew in the 9th century where it was. So Caliph al-Ma'mun got together a gang of workers with sledgehammers and chisels, and he went up onto the north face of the Great Pyramid, roughly where he thought the door might be, and he started breaking his way in. And what we're looking at here is a man-made tunnel physically forced into the Great Pyramid and generally known as Mamun's Hole.
Have you walked through this?
You bet. I've walked through it more times than I can count. And that now is the entrance through which tourists enter the Great Pyramid.
What floor is this on? Is this?
Oh, it's about 25 feet up, maybe 30,
25 feet up,
maybe
okay.
30 feet up. But the true entrance, of course, has now been found, and it's a little bit above Mamun's Hole, and you can see that there are slabs of stone in a kind of that sort of shape, like an A figure, which block it. If you search for true entrance to the Great Pyramid, you can see it as well. There it's a little bit above Mamun's Hole, but nobody who goes to the Great Pyramid today goes in through that true entrance. They all go in through Mamun's Hole.
Is this what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's okay. Right. That's actually the real entrance to the Great Pyramid.
And are you actually able to go on through it?
No, because at a certain point, this is another of the curiosities, is that the internal passageway system of the Great Pyramid was deliberately blocked with gigantic granite blocking stones. So when the Mamun and his team broke in, they didn't know exactly where they were going. But as they'd got deeper into that cavern that you were showing us, as they'd got deeper into that, hammering away, they suddenly heard something very large falling in a nearby space. There was a space nearby where something huge fell. And that struck them as interesting. They knew where the sound came from. They started heading for that. And they found themselves in what is called the ascending corridor of the Great Pyramid. And underneath them, behind where they cut in, were these huge granite huge granite blocking stones, which blocked that passageway. But they had gone round them and found themselves in the passageway system. And from there, it was clear running. They could go up the ascending corridor. They could enter the Queen's Chamber. They could then continue on up the Grand Gallery, and they could come to the King's Chamber. That was the situation once they'd broken in and found the original system.
So what did they? So this right here, Rob. Just if you don't mind watching it one time all the way through, just to kind of get a feel.
Yeah.
Rob, if you can just play this, go forward.
What you're walking through is a man-made tunnel broken in by force.
Put it at regular speed, Rob. Go ahead.
It's a tunnel that was broken into by force, roughly hacked out of the body of the Great Pyramid, which fortunately accidentally led to this, which is the ascending corridor.
So this is not built. Man opened this up.
Yes. There's okay. The complications of the Great Pyramid are beyond belief. There's an ascending corridor, but there's also a descending corridor.
Were these stairs there, or did somebody build it?
No, those stairs have been put in modern times.
Okay, got it.
They did not exist. Let's keep on going down.
So we're going down now.
No, yeah, let's go down. Let's go down to the descending corridor. No, we're in the Queen's Chamber. No, we're not quite going the right way at the moment. We're going up. But there's two ways. You can go up or you can go down. And we did see the down view there. This is it. Then you come into the so-called subterranean chamber, cut out of bedrock 100 feet beneath the base of the Great Pyramid. When you come up that, you then join the junction of that and the Grand Gallery, and you can then continue all the way up to the top.
How high does this route go? Like, are you going up a lot or not a lot?
You're going up hundreds of feet at a slope of 26 degrees. And by the way, that's worth making a point of too, because the external slope of the Great Pyramid is 52 degrees. And every corridor, every passageway within the Great Pyramid slopes at 26 degrees. That's, of course, half of 52. So we know that geometers and mathematicians were at work. It's not an easy... Once you get to the Grand Gallery, it's fine, because that's almost 30 feet high. But when you're going up the ascending corridor or going down the ascending corridor, you're in a passageway, I should call it. You're in a passage that is about 3 feet 5 inches in height. Now, that means that you're going to have to bend over double, pretty much, to go down it. And what I've learned from years of exploration of the Great Pyramid is that if you're going down one of those passageways, it's better to go down backwards because then you don't keep smashing your head on the top of it. If you go down forwards, you're going to bump your head 5 times by the time you get to the bottom. But if you go down backwards, that doesn't happen. Anyway, it's very difficult to, particularly for anybody who's unwell, to actually go up there.
You're going to think I'm crazy when I tell you this, but the last 13 and a half years, I've been working on my first fiction book to write, ever. Fiction book to write. And while I finished this book, a year ago, I got the strangest phone call about one of the characters in the book where the guy wanted to meet with me, and he read the book. And afterwards, was like, wait a minute, am I the villain in the book? This is a story about a character named Asher, who is half Armenian, half Assyrian, whose father was involved in the Iranian Revolution, linked to Savak, working with the Shah, that they escape and he gets recruited to a secret society. Well, when you go to the secret society, it's been around for a couple thousand years. They've developed some of the craziest leaders of all time. And they test you. There's unique tests that they have at this society where they test to see your emotional mental toughness. One of the tests that they have is very rigorous. It's purely mental. Of course, there's a physical one, but one is mental and emotional. If you're Armenian, if you're Syrian, if you're Persian, this is a book you're going to be reading and saying, holy moly, this is the kind of stuff you talk about in here? Yes. If you're somebody that's fascinated by history, this is a book for you. Characters. There's a technology that this society, secret society, builds where you go into a vault. I won't spoil it for you. When you go down, they have a technology where you get to sit down and watch and have a 3-4 hour conversation with Tupac. You can set up a debate between Karl Marx and Ayn Rand. Karl Marx is in the book, who wrote Communist Manifesto. Ayn Rand, who wrote Atlas Shrugged, is in the book. Marilyn Monroe explains the concept of seduction and sex in the book. When you read the book, it's about development of the next leaders in the world and how they do it and how they've been doing it for many years. And it's also about how to prevent the end of civilization and how this organization goes about doing it. So, I've never written a parenting book before, but if I ever wrote a parenting book, this is the closest thing to it because it's all mindset, a lot of crazy stories. Again, 13 and a half years. Trust me, I told myself I will not publish this book until I sell my insurance company and I'm fully disconnected from it, where it's no longer my responsibility 100%. When you read this, if you're a creative person, if you like fiction books, if you enjoyed Atlas Shrugged, or if you enjoy Divergent, if you like books like that, I think you're going to enjoy reading this book. It's the creative side. Business books is very easy. Here's how you do it. Here's how this how it works. This is very creative. If you haven't placed the order yet, now you can order it on Simon & Schuster, Amazon. I'm going to put the link up below somewhere here, maybe even in my profile. Go order the book and read it. I've never written a book where I can't wait to read your reviews to see what you think about this book. So I'm going on this wild journey, and we have some plans with this book here. If you support the things that I work on, I would appreciate you going and reading the book, order the book on Amazon, and then post a review.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.